Hello and welcome back. Welcome back to Diverse Conversations. We really hope you're enjoying these new set of conversations in this new year of 2023. And it's really a pleasure for me to continue these ongoing conversations with our Canadian pharmacy innovators. Today, I have the opportunity to speak with none other than Lindsay Dixon. Lindsay is a registered pharmacist from Victoria, British Columbia, where she currently works with Heart Pharmacy Group. Lindsay has over 10 years of community pharmacy experience, the majority of which has been in the area of community pharmacy management. In March of 2020, Lindsay founded Friendly Pharmacy 5, a multimedia platform where Lindsay harnesses the power of video to communicate science to the public and provide viewers with credible, evidence-based information. This work led to countless media engagements and collaborations with scientists and healthcare professionals, both nationally and internationally. In 2021, Lindsay was awarded the Ben Gant Innovative Practice Award from the BC Pharmacy Association for her work on the channel throughout the pandemic. Lindsay is also a volunteer science communicator with COVID-19 Resources Canada, where she works with scientists and healthcare professionals from across the country to help to educate the public about the COVID-19 vaccines. Lindsay is passionate about advocating for the essential role of pharmacists in all healthcare settings and equipping the public to make informed choices about their own health by providing them with credible, science-based resources and education. And it's my great pleasure to welcome Lindsay to this conversation, where we'll be speaking about her journey as a social media influencer, as well as that of being a pharmacist and how does she manage wearing both those hats. So please help me in welcoming Lindsay Dixon. All right, so now we have Lindsay joining us. Lindsay, welcome to Diverse Conversations podcast. It's a pleasure to have you, and I cannot wait because you have been a guest that has truly inspired me to take on this journey into podcasting and putting myself out and, doing things that I may not necessarily be comfortable with. But I think you have been an inspiration for sure, because seeing the way you grew with your channel on YouTube, Friendly Pharmacy 5, I think we have a lot to unpack today. And as a pharmacist and a YouTube star, I'm really excited to have you on this platform today. So thank you so much for making the time to be with us today.
Thank you so much, Aska, for having me. And, I think that one of the silver linings of this pandemic has been that someone from the West Coast of Canada, so I'm in Victoria, BC, can find someone like Aska Patel over in Ontario. And you inspired me, Aska, and your work inspired me and continues to inspire me. So it's an honor to be on this, in this interview with you on your podcast. And I really love all the interviews. And so being included as a guest to me is really an honor. It's really humbling. And the admiration is mutual.
Thank you very much. And I think it's, as you rightly mentioned, it's the admiration is mutual. And I think before I start, talking more and more about your work, I do want to hear it from you, because as a pharmacist, we do not have a lot of social media stars. And I see you as our path breaker, to be honest, even though there may be have been other pharmacists, but pardon my ignorance, but I see you as our breakout star. So I guess, I would love to hear it from you in terms of your journey from being a pharmacist to where you are today with your YouTube channel and all the incredible work that you're doing. Can you just shed a little bit of light on that?
Yeah, definitely. So I first want to make it clear that prior to starting my YouTube channel, I had never really gone on YouTube. I didn't even know how to set up a channel. I actually really disliked YouTube. And I also was not very active on social media other than a couple of personal accounts. I had never done any kind of graphic design like you can do now on Instagram. And so I think if nothing else, hopefully this story, people can relate to it if they feel like they're inadequate, because I really came from not knowing how to do hardly anything. And I still am learning. Like, it's a huge learning curve. So I've been a pharmacist for over 13 years. I work in Victoria, British Columbia. I worked in Vancouver as an associate for a large corporate chain for a while. And then I came back to Victoria, where I was working for a few years as doing some contract work with Shoppers Drug Mart for one of the best associates ever, Marie Byers. And it was a very, very busy dispensary. So this is just a few years back. And we always had these ideas for how to provide different clinical services. And we would do point of care testing for like strep A. And, we had all of these different ideas of things that we wanted to build, but we were so busy. It was such a busy, busy store. And I started to really feel like I didn't want to go back and be an associate again. I didn't want to start my own store. I had all these ideas for things that we could do, and my associate was on board, but we did not have time. And in that process of not having time, I started to notice that even my counseling started to suffer because everything was so rushed.
Yes.
And I started to just feel more and more like I was trapped in this model, I guess, or in this system. And I started to actually feel a bit devalued as a pharmacist, not because of the leadership, but because of the way the model was set up. And I started to feel like the patients really didn't understand us.
Yes.
And that really started to grind in me. And I was just kept thinking, they don't understand who we are. They don't understand what we do. They don't understand what we know. They don't even know how to ask the right questions. And we're so rushed that we don't have the time to stop. I mean, for some cases you can, but other cases it's like, well, you don't want to listen to what I have to say, or I'm just going to make this a short counsel. And really, there's so much value lost. So when I had my second child and I went on maternity leave, I left with that feeling of what am I going to do in pharmacy? And I called it like an early midlife crisis, because I wasn't like midlife, but I was like, oh my goodness, what am I going to do? This is terrible. And so I started looking at all the different options. So I looked at a PharmD and I looked at hospital pharmacy, and, all of these things looked great, but there, sometimes certain things would be like, well, I would have to, work full time and I have 2 young kids. And so nothing really seemed to fit. And a couple of years later, my son was born with some health issues. And so that made me take a little bit more of an extended parental leave. And a couple of years later, I really hadn't figured it out. I had listened to a ton of podcasts. I had watched what was going on in the United States with so many pharmacists being let go, and a lot of them going into like developing a personal brand. But I thought, oh, that's not for me, because I don't like attention. And I really don't. I'm an introvert. So I was just about to go back to community pharmacy because that's what I know and that's what I can do. And that's when the pandemic hit. And so that's when my kids were brought out of daycare, and because my son had this health issue, we made the decision for me to stay home for a while. And that is when I decided to start the channel, because when the pandemic started, I was talking to friends and neighbors, and I realized that these people were getting most of their information about the pandemic from social media.
Right.
And so that's when I started making PowerPoint presentations without showing my face to try to explain some things. So, and of course that evolved over time, which we can get into. But it really just came out of a desire to help people in some way. And during a time that, it was unprecedented. We'd never been through anything like that, right? So
yes. Absolutely. And thank you so much for sharing that. I think you have touched on some great points that from your own, your own perspective and your own journey, which kind of, I guess, were pivotal. But I also want to add, you call yourself an introvert, but I also feel like introverts have the best creative minds because they spend so much time internalizing a lot of the information that they collect. So no surprise there for me. I guess now I understand why Friendly Pharmacy 5 is success the way it is today. But I guess I also, and I think, I'd love to kind of pick your brains further and just talk about your experiences being on social media, putting yourself out there. I'm sure it was not an easy task for you. Given that, you were not on social media to begin with when you even started on this journey, what has been your experience like to, being a social media personality and an influencer that you are today? How do you describe that? Let's start with that. How do you describe that experience, and what is it that still motivates you to continue that?
Yeah, so I would say that it was really a growth period. It was very, very uncomfortable, but I knew that because it was uncomfortable, I needed to lean into it, because I had not really felt that challenge like in community pharmacy, whereas this was something new and I needed to figure this out. And I was called upon a lot, very, very shortly into me making these videos, I had put a post out on Twitter, and I started to get called to be in the local news, be on local radio. And that was really challenging because I don't have media training. And as pharmacists, if we don't have like the certificate, we don't feel like we should be doing it. And that's for good reason, right? So I was very conscious of the fact that, first of all, we don't usually see pharmacists in the media. And so I loved that because I thought, whoa, look at this. We can show our community who we are and what we know. Who knew that a pharmacist could talk about a pandemic and a virus? And who knew that the pharmacist knows this, right? So that's why almost every single interview, I would say yes. It wasn't because I wanted attention or my face out there. I wanted people to see like pharmacists because they put your name up there and then they see pharmacist. And so this was an incredible opportunity, right? One of the great things about this, I mean, I live in a city of about 400,000 people, was I did start to get recognized in the community, but we were wearing masks. So I wasn't recognized that much. So I think that that was a huge help for me because I did not get recognized very much because I am very, very introverted and I don't like the attention, right?
Right.
So, but it was a huge growth period. So from going to feel like, what do I have to say? What can I really even offer, to seeing that actually people were paying attention, people were listening, people were learning. And then I started to learn from the questions that they had that what more information I could give them. And I think that, it's different when you're patient at the pharmacy in a clinical kind of setting and they've just been to their doctor. When they ask you a question, unless they really know you as a pharmacist, the questions might be a bit different, because I notice now on the videos that I make and in different social media posts, people seem to be asking questions. They seem to be more comfortable to ask certain types of questions. So you can really get into, the consumer, the customer, the patient's head and understand where they're coming from. So overall, I mean, it was a huge, huge time of growth. It was very uncomfortable, but I did it because it was putting pharmacy in a light that it had not been before. And I was very careful, but I really wanted to put us out there because I thought this might be the only time that we can really like have this kind of platform, like, even national media. And now we see all across Canada, like last night I saw Graham McKenzie on CTV News, Halifax or something, and Cairo, and like so many pharmacists. Now it's almost commonplace. And we don't realize that, 2 years ago, like that was pretty rare.
Exactly. And thank you so much again for paving that path, right? I know how strong of a pharmacy advocate you are. And, again, I think that's the common grounds on which we connected on is a passion we share for our profession, and just seeing our profession being recognized for the unique skill set and the expertise that we bring to the system. And so oftentimes it gets, misguided under the context that we are behind the counters all the time, but it's not true. And you're breaking those barriers. You and so many other pharmacists today are breaking those barriers, and I'm so proud to see that. But at the same time, you very rightly mentioned the imposter syndrome, right? As pharmacists, like it's something we deal with so much, right? It's like, should I be doing this? I don't feel 100% about this. I don't know how I feel about this, right? And I think you alluded to that in your journey as well. It's you made that choice to put yourself in that uncomfortable position, right? And I am sure there's pharmacists who are listening to this conversation and hope that they will also continue to pursue these kind of activities and opportunities, because you just never know where they lead you. I mean, so happy to know the last time I checked, Friendly Pharmacy 5 has over 17,000 subscribers. Correct me if I'm wrong here, but incredible. Like, I'm so happy to see the growth. And like you mentioned, like patients are asking you questions because you're building that trust now with them too, right? And I think with healthcare providers, when patients know that this is a healthcare provider that I can trust, it drives them to then ask all those questions and share information. So, but also at the same time, I'm sure that journey that you've had so far was nothing short of being full of challenges as well. What were some challenges that you faced along the way to, creating the brand and the identity that you have today? Like, and if there was any learnings that you wish to share from there as well.
Yeah, I think choosing YouTube, I call myself an accidental YouTuber because I really didn't mean to become a YouTuber, right? That was just a platform where it was easier to disseminate information. So learning about YouTube, how the platform works, how the algorithm works, studying analytics and learning what really matters. That has been somewhat of a learning curve, though I like it because it's data, it's numbers, and you can kind of see, what works, what doesn't work, right? So that has been challenging but fun. I think that, getting used to people recognizing me. Sometimes I don't get recognized like all the time, but sometimes like you can tell people are looking at you a little bit longer when you're out in public. That's sometimes a little bit awkward, but that's fine. That's part of what this is, right?
Right.
I have loved learning about like how to use Canva and make infographics and writing, and it's opened up a whole different side of me that honestly I never thought of myself as a creative person. I'm not artistic, but when I took the pharmacy knowledge I had and started putting it into different pieces like that and different forms of content, I realized like I think this is what I was born to do, and so what that looks like in the future, I don't really know, but as long as I'm learning, and this is kind of always how it's been in the trajectory of my career, and I think many pharmacists are like this, as long as we're learning and we're a bit challenged and we can kind of sink our teeth into something, we're happy. Yes. And the growth of the channel has been great. I think it could have been a lot faster had I been a little bit more focused, had the tech been a little bit better, even if I niche down into a certain area, which I think a lot of pharmacists could do if they're you have a specialty, and you could do that on any one of the platforms, right? So, and then learning all those different platforms, right? So I've tried to learn all of them. I don't recommend that, but I've tried to learn a little bit about all of them, and so that's been eye-opening as well.
Absolutely. And I know for a fact because I was there at your Canadian Pharmacists Association presentation on social media, engaging with social media as a pharmacist. And it was an eye-opener for me too. So, I see this as, you're an expert in this field and I come to you with questions all the time as well. So
yes, for sure.
But at the same time, it's like, I'm really glad that these kind of platforms have provided us this opportunity to connect, right? Like-minded individuals. And one other initiative, which I cannot, forget to mention, is you have also started an Instagram page for creative healthcare providers who are, in this area. So if you want to speak to a little bit about that as well, because I think that's a community, if you're looking to, start along this journey, I think it's a great platform. Lindsay shares some great advice and some tips on that page as well. So if you can talk a little bit about that as well, that'd be great.
Yeah, so a lot of the things that I've learned, I've been kind of learning in a silo, right? It's just me here. And I was thinking before the Canadian Pharmacy Association conference, how can I share some of the things that I've learned, or share some of the experience, and even share some of the difficulties, right, that are involved in this. And I also saw a lot of pharmacists that were doing amazing things, and even other healthcare professionals that were really doing some incredible work online, like on different social media platforms. And I thought, we are all kind of in our little silos. I wish there was a place where we could all congregate. And so I'm still developing that, and it's called CreateRx. Right now, we're mainly on Instagram, though I do have a LinkedIn page that I still need to develop. And it's just a place for people who are looking to maybe develop their skills a bit, or maybe they have an idea and they're not exactly sure how to execute it. To go and find community there, because there's over 100 of us, and there are a lot of pharmacists that are doing these incredible things, and they're specializing in different areas. Like we have a mental health pharmacist, we have Ashka Patel, we have Dr. Andrew Furlan on there, who has a massive YouTube following, right? And so that's my hope, is that it would be a place to find community, and also to get that expertise that you need. It's something that I'm hoping in this next year to be able to devote some more time to, because the challenge we have with all of this is time, right? Because it all takes time. But I'm hoping that CreateRx can be developed. I just actually bought the domain, and it can be developed more in the future to be a resource for healthcare professionals who are seeking to be a bit more creative, a little bit more innovative, and to help give them the resources and the confidence to communicate whatever message it is that they want to communicate via the digital tools that we have now.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing that. And we'll definitely keep an eye out for, Create RX, especially on Insta, but also on the other channels. So we'll be waiting for your announcements on those for sure. And while we're talking of this community, I know a lot of pharmacists, burnout has been real. There's a lot of pharmacists who are looking for ways to explore other ways to engage with their audience, whatever their target audience may be. What are some opportunities you see for pharmacists in this new world of engaging with your market and your target audience, to how can they leverage their expertise and connect with their audience via the social media platforms that you have worked with so far?
Yeah, I think that there are endless opportunities, of course, but again, time is the limiting factor, right? So if you are, I've seen pharmacies do this. But often what you see online, and this kind of irritates me sometimes, is that you see all the front store, right?
Yes.
Like, buy this cream, buy that. And there's no scientific knowledge attached to that. So you're elevating the front store, which is important, and it's a necessary part of the business. But I think there's a huge opportunity for a pharmacist to, you can just put up, a very simple Instagram post telling a patient or telling people about almost any topic about, asthma, or did you know that allergies are caused by this or that? I mean, I think that there's a huge opportunity. I would suggest that you think about, who are you trying to talk to? Mm-hmm. So are you trying to talk to all of your patients, or are you specifically trying to talk to your patients who are middle-aged women and they are going through or about to go through menopause? Or, what is your specialty? Talk about that and pick one platform. Don't try to be everywhere, and don't try to learn everything, because then you will end up talking to no one, being ineffective, and you'll feel like you failed. So just pick something that you're really knowledgeable about, pick something that you see there's a need for. So maybe your patients are asking you questions about something over and over and over. Well, you could tell the patient the answer to that question, but I mean, you could also talk to hundreds of people online, right? Through social media, through an Instagram account or wherever it may be. And you could actually reach your whole community, right? Mm-hmm. And you could also maybe give them like a more complete answer than you might in the dispensary, right?
Yes.
So I think the opportunities are immense. I think that tapping into the creativity and what's the word I want to look for? But like new grads, yes. Okay? New grads are not going to have these technical challenges. They grew up with social media. And I think that if you partner even a new grad, like a PharmD, with a more experienced pharmacist, I think the synergy there could be amazing, right? So you have like the creativity and just the energy of a new grad, but then you have the wisdom and the experience of this knowledgeable pharmacist who's maybe afraid of social media, right? So I think the potential for growth and synergy there, and just creating something really beautiful, could be inspiring even for your pharmacy team, right? So I think there's huge opportunity.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. And that kind of, ties in very nicely, because I think we're also at a crossroads as a profession where we're trying to, solidify identity. I think we have gained a lot of grounds during the pandemic in terms of, making sure that the healthcare system understands, what we bring to the table. And I think we have done really good work in terms of solidifying some of those aspects, but I know there's still more work to be done. And I do see, like, the engagements that you do and so many other pharmacists, social media influencers do, is it helps in solidifying that understanding, right? In making sure that patients now think of, do I always have to ask my doctor about this question? No, wait, I can also ask my pharmacist about this question too, right? Like it gives them an opportunity to educate and all of that. So as we're evolving our identity as pharmacists, and as healthcare providers outside of the traditional pharmacies, I guess, what are some, I guess my question is, how do we as social media, like when we're engaging with social media, I know you have to be careful of some things, and you have to be mindful of what you're putting out, because, these are permanent records that are created and there's really no way of you pulling them out. But like, what are some things to be mindful of as you are creating this identity for yourself in the virtual world, and in the social media platforms? Like, what are some advice or tips that you wish to share for somebody who's looking to do this?
Yeah, and I want to say that I do put a lot of videos out and a lot of content out, but I do it all very carefully. And I
Mhm.
think we have to be as careful on social media as we are in the dispensary. And
Yes.
so if you think about this post, this video, it could go viral.
Mhm.
It could be misinterpreted, even if it's misinterpreted by one person. What kind of an impact could that have on that person? And the thing with social media is that people who are, say, on YouTube, because that's where
Mhm.
I am mostly, they they seem to want an answer that's very black and white,
Yes.
or it's very direct, and it's not always that way. There has to be room for nuance. There's a reason why we go to school and study for years and years, to be able to
Yes.
practice in this way. So being very careful with how you answer questions. I do have people who ask for healthcare advice. I've had people who will put, their whole story, medical story on a comment. And I mean, I can delete those comments to protect their privacy, but I will also respond saying I cannot provide any healthcare advice.
Right.
I do have a disclaimer on my videos, just saying that please do not make any changes to your medication or anything like that. This is not medical advice. So, I mean, anything you put out, you do have to be very careful. And also, just don't talk about what you don't know.
Yes.
So unless you really know a topic inside out, and I mean, start with something very simple, right? And I always use the example of like how to dispense of your medication, or like things that cannot be really terribly misinterpreted. And as you develop it, it's a skill, right? And as you do more and more, you'll figure out how to communicate things that could be, quite sensitive, or things that are a little bit more complex, in a way that people are not going to misinterpret. So
Yes.
I would say, definitely proceed, but yeah, be careful. And you can't give medical advice, and you do need to respect the rules and the guidelines of your college, right?
Yes.
And also always remember that when you are on social media, you are speaking for all pharmacists.
Yes.
So how will this impact your profession? And how will this impact your community? And I think as long as you do that, the net will be positive,
Mhm.
but yes, there's definitely a responsibility to it.
Absolutely. You have put it so well. I think, absolutely, it's a new avenue for us to pursue, but at the same time, it comes with a lot more responsibility and a lot more gray, if I may say
Yes.
so, right?
Yeah.
From, I think, combined our experiences together, like there's a lot more gray to be navigated before, as you're making active decisions every single day of, what you're going to put out there. And, I have stories to tell in terms of what happens when backlash happens, but I would love to hear from you, and because you're more seasoned than I am, how have you dealt with that part of being on social media, where if there's any critiques or any negativity, like I hope you've never had to deal with it, but if you did, can you share a little bit about how you dealt with it?
Yeah, and I would also say to that, Ashka, and I don't think that I'm more experienced than you at all. But
You
I
are.
would also I would also say to that, like there's definitely ways to handle that. And like I said, as you go, you will get better at it. I'm actually surprised that I have not had more negative comments, or even personal attacks, or people questioning the credibility of what I'm talking about. I haven't had that. I mean, obviously there's sometimes there's like the one-offs, but you can
Yes.
generally dismiss those because they're not really criticizing the content. They're more just trying to dig at you.
Mm.
And I often will just point them to the reference. If you don't like what I'm saying, like it's always based in scientific references, and I always post my references. So the argument is really not against me. You can talk to the author of the paper,
Yes.
or you can talk to the reference, and here it is. So that's kind of how I've handled that. I've also never really given my opinion on anything, because this is
Mm.
not about opinions. This is about presenting scientific knowledge. And yes, science can change over time, right? But
Mhm.
we're constantly following the science. And so if you're not giving your opinion, no one needs to know your opinion.
Yes.
When you are putting yourself out there as a pharmacist, I mean, if you're putting yourself out there as, I don't know, a mom or whatever
Yes.
it is, that's a little bit different, but you are part of a regulated profession, right?
Mhm.
So think about what you're going to put out there, and be responsible, and have your references, and then you can just point people to the reference.
That's a very useful advice. Thank you very much for sharing that, because I definitely feel like, I know, I mean, and I guess maybe we have just, because we are such very different niches altogether with very
Yes.
different audiences that we work with. But I think to everything you add, you shared there, I completely agree. And I think one thing that if I can just put this in there, because we're talking about social media presence, is, just having that conversation, internal dialogue with yourself, and being comfortable with make that agreement with yourself that you're going to be okay, and you're not going to take any feedback, negative feedback especially, personally, and only when you're comfortable with that, then proceed with it. Otherwise, the world is a little scary in terms of what people, because there's no filters, there's nothing stopping anyone from doing whatever they want to. Especially if you have a photo of yourself or anything like that, people can do anything they want to with that. And there's really no law stopping them from doing that. So, just when you have established that comfort, it just makes the process so much more easier, because then, like you mentioned, Lindsay, just making sure you're not taking it personally, you're rather just stating the facts and then just pointing them to that for further information and clarification. So thank you so much for sharing that. I learned something from you today too. So there you go.
Oh, great.
Yeah,
I will say, ask if you don't mind me adding.
Yeah, absolutely.
I will say that one of the challenges that we face, and this is not really new to pharmacy, but I think it's been enhanced by the pandemic, is that we suffer right now in healthcare from a lack of trust.
Yes.
And I know that as pharmacists, even prior to the pandemic, we heard a lot of, oh, you're big pharma. Oh, you just want people taking pills. And I mean, I would always be so upset by these comments, because that was not what I was there for. And I know that is not what pharmacists, like, this is not why we signed up to pharmacy at all, but it was a huge misunderstanding. And I still do get those comments. Well, why would you trust a pharmacist? And, this is big pharma, but I'm getting them less and less. But I do think, as we see, even different areas where parents are choosing not to vaccinate their children, say for measles, and we're seeing outbreaks, and, the challenges with communication from public health across our country about the pandemic, there's been a lot of confusion, and we've lost a lot of trust in the healthcare profession. And so I think that that's an opportunity, and that's, I really want to call to any pharmacists or healthcare professionals that are watching this, that are considering putting their voice out there. We really need you, because we need you to combat this misinformation that's out there. This is a huge problem, but I do see that we can have an impact. And I see other healthcare professionals that are rising up, and they are able to do this successfully. And I see some of them who kind of start out kind of shy, and then they really get right into it. And it's really, really important. It's not just social media is out there. No, social media is here. That's where your patients are in the evening when they're not in your pharmacy. They're on social media. If you want to reach them, if you want to combat misinformation, if you want to really have an influence, and I mean, I'm not taking away at all from the influence that we have in our communities, in our specific positions, but there is a huge opportunity, and it's not just an opportunity, it's a need right now. We really have to build that trust back up.
Thank you so much for pointing that out, because I agree, misinformation, especially during the pandemic, we have seen the consequences of that, right? And we continue to see today as well, as you rightly mentioned, with, now patients making choices about, how they're going to access the healthcare and when they're going to access the healthcare. And as Lindsay mentioned, like you heard it right from the influencer, we need more voices. But as she mentioned, make sure you're stating the facts in its evidence-based care, just like we practice in our dispensaries or pharmacies or whatever practice setting we are in. We take those principles, we're just changing the platform of how we deliver that information to our patients. Thank you so much, Lindsay. And I think I cannot, let you go before I ask you the question that this podcast was created on, which is the future of pharmacy, and, how you see pharmacists practicing over the next 5 to 10 years. I would love your insights as somebody who has seen both sides of the world, and would love to see how you see the future of pharmacy and for pharmacists as well.
Yeah, I was actually speaking with someone who's only been practicing for a few years last week, and I warned him. I said, the next few years in pharmacy are going to be a bit messy because we're growing, right? And growth is always challenging, and it can be a bit messy. And so we're seeing minor ailments rolling out in Ontario, as well as, British Columbia. And I think, was it Prince Edward Island or something, is right? So I think that it's going to be challenging because there's going to be a lot of growth, and we do have a very serious situation with burnout that's happened, right, and been exacerbated. I am excited about the future, you know, the next 5 or 10 years. I think that we really need to start utilizing and treating our pharmacy technicians better, and also utilizing them more, because that's going to allow us to move to more of a clinical place in pharmacy. I think that seeing pharmacies as health hubs, as centers, not just for information and medication, but centers for healthcare, is something I'm really excited about. And we see pharmacist clinics that are starting to open. And I also see this huge wave of digital healthcare and digital, I guess, just digital health in general. And so we have apps, we have, you know, there's going to be direct to consumer. There already is direct to consumer tests. How is that going to play out for pharmacists? How will we stay on top of that? It's something I definitely want to address in the channel. So very exciting. I think that it's going to be a bit of a whirlwind. I'm thankful that we have new grads, PharmDs that are, you know, going to rise up and help us through this. So I think there's going to be, as always with pharmacy, there's a lot of change, right? But I think that change is needed. And I think that if we are able to kind of grow through it and again, utilize pharmacy technicians more, Kristen Watt has done an incredible job of that. Keeping an eye on her. What's Kristen doing, right? And I know you had her on the channel. It's an excellent interview. People should go and watch that. I shared that with our pharmacy group. So that's where I see it going. Definitely more clinical, definitely more digital. It's going to be a little bit messy, and but we're going to grow in the process.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. I mean, the future looks pretty bright to me, and every growth comes with its own set of growing pains, right?
Yes.
But I know that when we have professionals like yourself and so many others who have tapped into various aspects of it, I think it makes the growing pains a bit more bearable. And I think it's really just coming together, right? As making sure that we're going into the future together rather than being more segregated. And I think that unity is so much more needed now than it has ever been before. Thank you so much, Lindsay. But before I let you go, I do want to know what's next for Lindsay. What's next for Friendly Pharmacy in 5? You know, what can we expect from you and like the channel, and anything else you wish to share with us?
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to continue to work on the channel. I'm always open to collaborating with other pharmacists. If you want to reach out to me, please feel free to do so. I'm always looking for people who are innovating or want to learn. I'm very interested in developing more clinical services. So I'm looking into maybe getting into pharmacogenomics and some other areas where I can offer these clinical services in pharmacy, and maybe virtually if we get the okay to do that eventually, right? And then just continuing to, I really actually do love making the videos now. It's something that's kind of grown on me. So I see myself doing that, maybe an audio podcast. You know, I have so many ideas and so little time, right? I'm a mom as well, right? So I think I'm excited about the future, but I have to be careful that I don't get too many things going, right? So yeah, but we'll see. We'll see what happens over the next year or two. It's very exciting.
I'm very excited for you, and I look forward to seeing more videos. I mean, your videos have been very compelling. I love the way you structure them. So absolutely. And I think they're a great resource, even for, you know, somebody who's wishing to educate their patients on some of the common, you know, medical topics or questions that they be receiving. I actually have enjoyed watching your videos, and I urge everyone who's listening to this podcast, do check it out. We will be linking her YouTube channel, but it will be there as well. So please feel like, you know, give it a look out, because I think it's worth, even if you don't have the time, you can at least refer your patients to that channel to get them the resources that they may require. And as always, Lindsay, I'm super excited for you. I really do, you know, I cannot wait to see what 2023 will look like for all of us, but I'm certain Friendly Pharmacy 5 is going to grow from where it has been in this year. So, you know, I'm really excited for the growth that awaits you in the new year.
Likewise, and thank you so much, Ashka, for the invitation and for all of the work you're doing. You're really uniting the profession, and you're really inspiring all of us as to what you can really do as a pharmacist, right? So I also look forward to your future interviews and what you're doing. And I really, really appreciate it. And I'm humbled to be on your incredible podcast.
The honor is all mine. Thank you so much for making the time. I know it was not easy to collaborate and coordinate on this, but I'm so grateful that I had this opportunity to have this conversation. I learned so much, and I'm sure the audience will learn so much more from this conversation and the incredible insights you have shared. So thank you again, Lindsay. It has been my absolute pleasure to have had the opportunity to have this conversation with you, and I can't I look forward to hopefully seeing you in person again. But till then, we'll sign off for now.
Thank you so much, Ashka. It's been great.
Awesome. All right. So make sure you tune into our next week's episode for our next guest. But until then, be sure to like and subscribe, especially to this episode, and show Lindsay some love by going on to her Friendly Pharmacy 5 channel and subscribing to there as well. All right. With that, we're signing off. Bye-bye.